Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla, let's go over the market, and let's figure out what happened today with Tesla, what we can expect moving forward into a fresh month next month. I believe Monday is what? The start of July, is it not? Yeah, it's literally the 1st of July. So yeah, let's jump into it. If you enjoy it, don't forget to hit the like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, my membership section is live. That link, of course, is down below in the description of the video. For just $3 a month, you get access to all my intraday thoughts, posts, updates, technical flow, technical analysis, rather, options flow, and all that stuff every single day on Tesla and sometimes other stocks, but mainly Tesla, of course. Every day, the market's open. So again, if you're interested, sometimes we have discussions, people ask me questions, etc. If you're interested in that kind of, community, if you will, and that kind of information, well, that link is down below for $3 a month. But jumping into a Tesla closing the day, actually green ever so slightly, up about 0.3% on the day, closing at pretty much $198 per share, which compared to the market being down about 0.5%, which is a nice bit of an outperformance by Tesla. So let's talk about it. So today we, of course, had a pretty decent day, right? We ended up rallying up almost exactly to my second target, right? My first target was this pretty much 199/200 range. My second target was about this 205 pivot level from all the way back here. And I guess arguably the third target is the true gap fill sitting at pretty much 208 almost. But, that's like the bonus target. But my main targets were, of course, like I said, 199/200 and 205, right? We got pretty damn close to 205. We went up as high as pretty much 203. Pretty darn close, right? But, so there's two things that are interesting here, and one's good and one's bad, depending on what side of the coin I guess you are. But the good news is the fact that, we closed above yesterday's close, right? We ended up actually going below it. We gap filled, and we actually went well below it. We went all the way down to 195, but we ended up recovering back up, and we ended up closing above yesterday's close. That to me is a good sign. That shows more strength actually than I thought we would see. I thought we would actually pretty much close below yesterday's close, but we didn't. That shows strength. That's actually a pretty positive sign. I would say that's a positive for Tesla, right? That does show some potential momentum heading into Monday, which is a good sign. The bad sign is the fact that we couldn't hold above and close above $200 per share. That's the bad sign, right? To be fair, and I want to make this very clear, so if we go to, let's go to 15-minute chart actually, right? So when Tesla came up all the way over here to about $203-ish per share, and a decent fall over here happening, a lot of red candles happened, some of them on a higher volume as well, but the overall buying volume was much higher than the selling volume. That's important to note. And important to note is the fact that this final candle you can see here on the 15-minute chart, massive candle on very much increased volume compared to half of the day, if you will, right? So the thing that's important to note here is the fact that, again, the buying volume, whenever we do get these green candles, is unusually elevated volume, especially relative to the selling volume. That's a plus overall. But the thing I want to mention here is the fact that when Tesla did reject and when it did drop down all the way to about 195, it wasn't just Tesla, it was the market. The market pretty much went down the rest of the day. You can see here, the market actually with the final candle, with the sell-off actually towards the end of the day, you can see here, massive red candle on the sell-off. Tesla had the exact opposite, massive candle with a buy. So that's a good sign to see. Let's take a look at the other stocks. You can see Google, massive sell-off. Pretty much every single, wow, what the hell actually happened here? Pretty much all of these other, Max 7, if you will, massive red candles towards the end of the day. At least some of them, and Meta here, Netflix, not as much for Netflix, but yeah, almost all of them with a pretty substantial red candle to the downside, like especially Apple. Like, what is that candle, right? Tesla, complete opposite. It's a good sign. That's a positive sign. That shows a bit of strength heading into Monday, which I like to see. So I wanted to make sure I mention that this wasn't just because Tesla just fell and it was just a Tesla thing. The whole market just retraced pretty much from this moment and for the rest of the day. So just keep that in mind. That's important, to kind of note, right? It wasn't a Tesla isolated thing. So the next thing I want to talk about is going to be pretty much, well, where do we sit moving into Monday? Where do we sit moving into next month, really? So because we closed below 200, I am a little bit skeptical. And the way I look at this is pretty simple, right? If Tesla ever closes above 205, that's probably the most important level. If Tesla really closes above 205, that's extremely bullish, even midterm. And I believe personally, moving up towards this kind of final Bullish trend line, if you will, which is this red line that's been rejecting us for multiple years now, ever since we come up to it, or rather every single time we come up to it, we've been getting rejected pretty substantially too. At some point, I expect it to break. Maybe this will be that moment. But if we do break above, close at least a daily candle, ideally a weekly candle above this pivot point over here of about $205 per share, I personally think Tesla is looking phenomenal heading its way into this 220 region, which is going to be essentially retesting that final Bullish trend line that I like to call it, right? So that's going to be kind of that important thing to do. Hopefully, potentially even July. I think it's a very real possibility we get that to happen in July if we close above 205. That's going to be like the bullish scenario. The quote unquote bearish, but ultimately still bullish scenario is going to be this. And this is, I'll explain what I mean by that. So if we do retrace from here, right? Because there is a chance that this is a top signal, right? Not really a top signal. I wouldn't say this is a top signal, but there is a chance that this is that we do top around here, I guess is what I meant to say. Maybe sometime next week, maybe delivery numbers on, I believe Tuesday they're coming out, could be the signal or the catalyst that brings us back down. That is a possibility. I want to make that very, very clear. That is a real possibility, or that could be the catalyst that sends us to 220. Make it, be very, clear about that. But assuming it's the path that does bring us back down, assuming this is the path that tops us around this general area, and we do retrace, we do cool off and all that stuff, because again, Tesla on the daily chart is overbought. We are still overbought, right? And the median line to kind of reset the stock on the daily is going to be, well, at the very moment 183, but it's going to slowly make its way up to us. So the ideal scenario is we don't really go down too much, we kind of go sideways, and this comes up to meet us essentially, and we kind of reset the stock from a sideways correction. In my opinion, that's the ideal scenario. But obviously with overbought conditions, and I said this before, once we break out, I think we can stay overbought for an extended period of time. That's exactly what we're doing, and that's still a real possibility that we continue doing that, especially considering the 1 hour actually did reset the stock. It did come back down from overbought territories and right back to that median line and bounced off of it almost to perfection. So the 1 hour is looking better, right? Stochastic, you can see, is bearish, but it's starting to kind of reset. It's starting to curl back up. RSI is definitely getting a little bit of a bearish divergence here, but you can also argue it's setting up a hidden bullish divergence, right? MACD is definitely flipped bearish, but honestly, the momentum, I think, for the 1 hour chart is still looking pretty okay. But the main thing I was going to say is if we do reject, right, what we could be setting up is a short-term bearish trend into an overall bullish trend. So what I mean by that is this. If I zoom out over here, I want to take some of these drawings out. It's getting I feel like it's getting a little too messy, but I'll keep it. Anyway, let's bring this tool out. So this move that we had up here, right, this 205 all the way, 205 range all the way here in late February, right? This could be just a massive cup and handle, right? And that's what we could be setting up here, because obviously cup and handle patterns like this are reversal signals, right? In this case, the other option, of course, is the inverted cup and handle. But because we're still technically in overall mid to long-term downtrend on Tesla, this regular cup and handle works out pretty darn well at a downtrend. And that's exactly what we're in, right? Overall, like in a bigger, broader picture. So the way I look at it is if this could just be a cup and handle. Now, unfortunately, like I said, that does mean that we will short-term-ish get a bearish trend, right? Because, well, we need to set up the handle, right? We have to set up that handle for that cup and handle pattern. And that's potentially what could be next. If we do reject from this level, if we do come down, that is what we're going to be doing up next. We're going to be setting up the handle for this cup and handle pattern. That is a very real possibility. Now, the question, of course, is, I'm sure, well, okay, fine. Well, let's assume we do that. Where do we retrace to? This is where the Fibonacci's come in. So you go ahead, take it from the overall swing low to arguably, again, assuming what we had today was a swing high, right? Just for, science, I guess we'll say for science, theoretical purposes, I can see us coming down, honestly, to about 180. I think 180 is a very real possibility, to potentially even as low as 170s, like low 170s. That is a very real possibility. But based on the strength that Tesla is, in my opinion, showing, I personally wouldn't be surprised if 180 is the lowest we get, and off of 180 we can get a nice bounce from there. But the three main levels to pay attention to would be 180, which is the 0.382 Fibonacci, the 0.5 Fibonacci sitting at around 171, again off of today's high, assuming today's the high roughly, and the lowest case scenario, the worst case scenario, is coming down to about the low 160s, which is a 618 Fibonacci level. Those are the worst. That's like the worst case scenario, but still maintaining a bullish trend, because that would just simply be just a very large handle of the cup if you take it from the Fibonacci from that swing low to the potentially swing high that we just had today. So that's kind of the main way I'm looking at it right now, right? Those are the possibilities. But again, the reason I say it's overall bullish still, even though it's short-term bearish, is because cup and handle is a bullish reversal pattern, right? We set up the cup, we set up the handle, which essentially is like a massive bull flag, and then we break out of that handle, and it will look something like this, right? So for instance, what you do is you take the handle, right? I'll just draw it out like in a very rough example as to what it could potentially look like. Let's say we go down something like this, we kind of zigzag in here, and then we ultimately break out of this handle, right? Something like this, we break out, and then you pretty much measure the move from the bottom of the cup, in this case right here, to the top of the cup, like the neckline, if you will, of the cup, which looks something like this. And you measure it from, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, you measure from the breakout of the handle, and that's kind of the measured move, which will pretty much take us all the way back up to about $250 per share, roughly. Just a very rough example. Again, this is just all assuming that this is even the pattern that we set up. I personally can see this happening. We'll see. Now, keep in mind, if we do break above 205, this pretty much eliminates this pattern, and we make our way straight up to that $220 per share much more quickly. So that is also still a real possibility. It really just kind of comes down to what happens next week and what happens with the delivery numbers. Does that push us up? Does that not push us up? That's the big question, in my opinion. So we'll see how that, how those numbers are and how the stock reacts to it. But that's kind of the main thing I'm looking at. Now, take a look at the weekly really quickly here. The weekly candle looks pretty decent, right? On elevated volume, you can see here, right? Pretty good volume, higher volume than the past, like what? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, about 7-ish weeks, right? So that's a pretty good sign that we're pushing up like this on elevated volume over the last 7-ish weeks. That's a good sign. We're breaking above many structures. We're closing above these levels that we've had many issues closing before, above this volume profile, which is currently sitting in the low 180s, which is, like I said, if we do set up that cup and handle pattern, I wouldn't be surprised if we come back down to about the low-ish, we'll say 180s, come back into this volume profile on the weekly chart, come back into an area that was old resistance many times. As I zoom in over here, you can see, right, all these wicks all the way over here sitting at about 180, mid to low 180s, right, constant rejection. We finally broke above it, we closed above it, that's a good sign. And now, you know, coming back down into it for a potential retest, right, something like this right here, boom, come back for a little retest around this general area off that volume profile we just showed, make that cup and handle, the handle itself, of course. It'll be the 0.32 Fibonacci, and then we just rally from there. That is a possibility. I want to make that very clear, and you should be mentally prepared for that. If you're not, I guess, right? That is a possibility. So just making sure all of you kind of understand this. Now, in terms of the indicators on the weekly, MACD still looks absolutely phenomenal. RSI looks phenomenal. Stochastic looks phenomenal. It is getting into overbought territory. So, you know, how much more room is there to run relative to the stochastic? Well, thankfully on the weekly, there's quite a bit actually, because, you know, we've gotten overbought many times on Tesla, right? A lot of the times you come up to these levels, Tesla gets overbought, and we're still, you know, there's still a ways to go before we actually truly enter like actual true overbought territory on Tesla. So there's more room to run. And this could be what gives us that run to about 220 before we really get to overbought territories, before we really get a rejection, before we really get a correction, if it's not going to happen right now, for instance. Anyway, that's the main thing I'm looking at right now, right? That's pretty much probably the most important things I am noticing. In terms of options flow, I'm not gonna lie, nothing too crazy. I mean, we had some puts come in here for next week, 1.47 million, right? But that could be already taken. But on top of that, there was also bought with a 1.11 million call for 200 strike. The put was, of course, 215 strike, all for next week. For all we know, that the profits have been taken on that already. When Tesla had that dump with the market, that is a possibility. In terms of options sold, there's been a lot of options sold for today. A lot of them were actually for today, for about $200 strike. There's some for July 19th, you can see here, for $200 strike. So people clearly think Tesla is going to be toppy somewhere around this general vicinity. I can definitely see it, but I guess the best way to really tell if Tesla is really going to start to correct is if we lose this green trend line, right? This green trend line has been supporting us pretty much on this run. Ever since we had this kind of false breakdown bear trap all the way over here back at 168-ish, we started this rise up pretty substantially too, right? And, you know, if you connect the lines essentially like this, you can see this is essentially that rising, you know, channel, rising wedge, whatever you want to call it, that we're pretty much in, right? If we break this, then that, you know, correction down lower, potentially even below 180 can actually begin. But until then, Tesla is still in an uptrend on the short-ish term, short to slightly medium term. So keep that in mind, right? This is, you know, until that breaks, it's still technically in a bullish trend in this short to medium term-ish trend. So just FYI, right? Keep that in mind. That's important to understand. But yeah, pretty much that's the main thing I'm looking at right now. So yeah, let me know what you're thinking down below. I'm a bit of a neutral position right now in terms of how I feel about this close. Again, we did close above the gap fill and yesterday's close, but we did close below 200. So I'm feeling a little bit neutral around that, but technically the stock still looks pretty decent. I still think it's possible to break above 205, but again, until we truly break above 205, you know, I would take some caution around here personally. I did de-risk slightly. Very so slightly. I did actually have cover calls at 197.5. I did buy them back. Obviously at profit. Unfortunately, not as much profit as if I bought them back towards the lower part of the day, but still about half, 50% profit. So I'm not complaining too much. Just definitely could have been better. Could have been better on that timing. I just didn't expect it to pump above 197.5 into close. I thought it'll be below it, but it did. Anyway, so with all that being said and done, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you for next week and on Monday. Peace.